Thank you so much. I know that we are getting close to cocktail hour, but hopefully we'll find this super interesting anyway. My name is Tisha Hulburd. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Kickfurther. I've been in marketing for about 20 years, doing both B2B and B2C, and joined Kickfurther about a year ago because I love the product and I love the mission. So Kickfurther is an inventory funding platform that solves the issues that many product entrepreneurs face. We pay for up to 100% of the cost of acquiring inventory, so reduces the need to cobble together multiple sources of financing to purchase inventory. We have a model where you don't pay until you start to sell, so covers the cash flow gap that many product entrepreneurs face. And our unique consignment model means that we are not a debt, and so we live off balance sheet, which is important to your finance teams. We're here today to be both educated and inspired, and so I have brought along two wonderful panelists whose stories are going to do that. So let's take a seat and we'll get started. Natalie, Ibraheem, Natalie, would you like to get us started? Maybe introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your company.
Awesome. Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Holloway. I'm the co-founder of Bala. Bala is a modern fitness equipment company. We make more functional and more fashionable products that are designed to be left out. So as a result, you see them more and you are more inspired to work out. So basically, we're trying to get the body moving.
My name is Ibraheem Basir. I'm the founder and CEO of A Dozen Cousins. We're a natural food brand, so we make beans, rice, and cooking sauces that are all inspired by Creole, Caribbean, and Latin American foods. You can buy us at most retailers, so Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Target, Walmart, etc. And I'll dig in a little bit more as we go.
Awesome, thank you. Now, you both have really interesting stories about how you came up with your idea. So, Natalie, would you like to get us started?
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. I was working in advertising 5.5 to 6 years ago, and I spent the bulk of my career working in advertising, building other people's large brands. And at the time, my boyfriend and I, we were kind of overworked, and we really were run down. Like, we were like burning the midnight oil, waking up again at 7 a.m. to do a client presentation. So we really like needed a break, and we said, why don't we quit our jobs, travel the world for a year, and then we'll come back and get jobs in advertising again. So we quit our jobs, we traveled, and it was essentially on this trip that we said, we finally had time to just like think for a second and not be bogged down by overworking, which is what we did the bulk of our career. And so it was on this trip that we were kind of brainstorming ideas, and that was just kind of in the back of our mind, like maybe we'll start a side business on this trip. And so we were doing a yoga class one day, and it was very meditative, and there was no sweatiness happening, and we really wanted to work out this particular day. So we were brainstorming, and we said, how could we have made this class harder and tailored it to our fitness needs? So we did land on the idea of added resistance, which exists in many forms, which was, dumbbells or wrist and ankle weights. And then we were like, aha, wrist and ankle weights are ugly. No one uses them anymore. They're neoprene. And really, like, I hadn't seen them since the 80s. So we were like, let's redesign that and kind of bring that product back into the world because it is a really useful tool. So my now husband and co-founder, over there, Max, actually sketched it out on a napkin right then and there, and we essentially got to work on our first product, which is Bala Bangles. So what we realized after we launched is that we uncovered a complete white space in an industry where no one was redesigning yoga mats or dumbbells or really any of the products that you interact with, or even like thinking about new ones. Everyone's kind of focused on like the tech side of fitness, like Peloton, Mirror, these things. And no one was looking at the obvious thing at the time, which was like redesigning tools you already use. So we began on this journey of redesigning a bunch of products and creating new products. And as a result, our products are more functional, fashionable, and help you work out more.
Thank you, Natalie. I just love that experience because it reinforces the notion that sometimes you just need deep thinking time. And vacation, travel, as I've talked with some today, is a way to do that. Ibraheem, you have a really great story behind your brand and company as well.
Thank you. So I grew up in Brooklyn in a really big family. So I'm one of 10 children. I have 11 nieces and nephews. And then when my eldest daughter was born, she was the 12th cousin. So first of all, that's just where the brand gets its name from. A dozen cousins is like literal, there were 12 cousins at the time. And, I always start there just because food was very central to my experience growing up. That was how we celebrated holidays. It's how we marked milestones. If I got a good report card, I could pick what we were going to have for dinner the next day. And so, I knew I wanted to work in the food industry really most of my life. Fast forward many years, I got my MBA. I started my career at General Mills. I started off working on Gushers, fruit roll-up and fruit by the foot. I got 2 root canals that year. This is an actual fact after 12 months. Who knows if there was a correlation or not. But I worked on a lot of the different brands at General Mills, and I ended my time there working on Annie's, which is an organic kids brand. They make macaroni and cheese, cookies, crackers, etc. And it was like a really transformative experience for me. That was the first time that I really paid attention to how ingredients were grown, whether or not it was healthy, what impact did it have on the planet, all those things, really resonated. And the thing that was missing for me was just the foods and the flavors that I had grown up with. So again, growing up in Brooklyn, it was very much this Black and Latino melting pot. So I would eat jerk chicken with yellow rice and black-eyed peas, and that was the flavors that I was used to, and you couldn't really find any of that stuff at Whole Foods or a lot of the retailers that I then began shopping at, right? Brands like Goya that I grew up loving, the flavors were great, the dishes were great, but then it would be 1,000 milligrams of sodium, or red number 40 is the number 2 ingredient, right? And so we really started the business just with the goal of could you keep the culture and authenticity of some of those brands, but pair it with really great ingredients? And so we started off with a line of ready-to-eat beans. They're all fully cooked in season. They're made with real vegetables and spices. They're cooked in avocado oil. We then moved into the rice category. So we cook our rice in real chicken broth. So you end up with 7 grams of protein, a few grams of collagen. Really the first brand to bring bone broth into that category. And then last year we launched our seasoning sauces. So essentially you can just coat a piece of protein, put it in the air fryer, put it on the grill. So we have a pollo a la brasa, a jerk chicken, so on and so forth. And so that's what we do, and just brick by brick, we're having fun with it. Like I said, mostly in retail today, but that's how we got started.
Wonderful. Now I know that both of you have families, and so the topic we're discussing is a day in the life. So what I think a lot of entrepreneurs would like to know is, how do you manage priorities? How do you decide what you're going to do, what gets done today? Maybe walk us through sort of a day in your typical life, or things that help you decide what to prioritize. Maybe to start with you, Natalie.
Okay, let's see. So I have a few non-negotiables. I mean, you already said it. I'm a mom of 2, and my baby is 8 months old, and I have a 2.5-year-old. So a lot going on in the house and a lot going on in Bala. So one of my non-negotiables is time with the kids. I know how precious and valuable these years are. We've all heard it, but it's I don't want the little years to go by and all I did was work. So it was really important for me to strategize something that worked for me. And what works is kind of calendar blocking, but with the kids. So then I have a few blocks in the day where I don't look at my email or my phone. And so essentially, when I wake up at 6 a.m., I won't look at my phone or email until I leave to drop my son off at school. And so I get really, really quality time with my kids in the morning, and I actually don't think about work until I start at 9 or whatever time that is. So then I go to work, and as a founder, we all know we're pulled in many, many different directions. So 1 hour I could be on an ops inventory planning call, and then the next hour I'm thinking about social posts or on with my ad agency. So the day is very different depending on the day. But then my second chunk of time is essentially I'll wrap it up at 3 or 4 p.m. and then do the same thing that I did in the morning. So spend 3 or 4 or maybe 5 to 7 until they go to bed, and then I wrap up my emails for the day. So I just make sure to have those undivided chunks, and then it helps me feel like re-energized to do the end of the day. But a couple other non-negotiables, scheduling wellness into my routine. So whether that's like a yoga class, like it's on my calendar weeks in advance, or a facial, like I have to have these things. I have a fitness brand, so making sure those are already in my calendar. And then my third non-negotiable is less meetings. So we've all had those days where you're bogged down 9 to 5 and you can't get any work done. And I'm somebody that sees my to-do list and my email building up and it's anxiety inducing. So essentially, I try to have less than 2 hours worth of meetings a day so that the rest of my day is spent driving the business in all the other areas that I'm needed versus bogged down 9 to 5, because then I feel like I can't really do any work. So little to no meetings if you can.
Very cool, and I'll try to add some things that are unique. I know a lot of it overlaps, so I honestly I've always been a sensitive sleeper. The first thing I think about when I wake up is whatever problem I have in my life on that day, right? And so like I usually wake up with like this jolt of stress. So what I've started doing is like going to the gym in the morning, and honestly it's less at this point about even like physical health as much as just like mental health. It's like the easiest way for me not to be writing emails in my head and like, thinking about what I'm going to say to this person the next time I see them, right? Like I just kind of focus on that for an hour or so. And then I take my eldest daughter to school. She's 5 years old. I really value that time. It's kind of like our quiet time in the morning. So she'll like ask me the most random questions. What happens when you die? And like all kinds of stuff. Honestly, we have really deep conversations in the little 20-minute drive to school. And so I try to protect that every morning. And then, once I get to the office, it's usually pretty rapid fire for like 4 or 5 hours, right? So from like 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., I'm usually in meetings of some sort. Honestly, the thing that I do love about being a founder is that the meetings are very different from one day to another. Like sometimes I'm looking at packaging design, sometimes I'm with a co-packer negotiating something about manufacturing. Right now we're actually moving our production to Mexico, which we're very excited about. It's one of the reasons that Kickfurther has been such a great partner to us, just as we kind of fund that inventory and fund that transition. So honestly, the middle of my day looks very different from day to day. And then similar to Natalie, I think like 2 or 3 o'clock onwards, I try not to have any meetings. That's usually the time where like I'm able to do my most creative thinking, I feel like, where I'm just like not interrupted. I can think about a bigger problem or a deeper issue. And generally I have my best ideas towards the end of the day. So I also like to keep that space empty. And that's my routine in a nutshell. I have dinner at night, with my family when I get home, and that's a day for me.
I can personally vouch for their morning routines for sure. When I scheduled a prep call, both were driving their kids to school. So it absolutely works. So great. Happy to hear that. Thank you for sharing. One of the things that Kickfurther loves about working with FounderMade is the commitment to community, the founder community. And so really thrilled to be here talking to you all. Thank you for sharing that information. But I'll bet that along the way, you have some lessons learned or some tips and tricks, things that you could share with the founder community that would be helpful.
I want to start with one quick one, which is remember your West Coast friends, because the reason we had this meeting early in the morning, and this happens all the time, is like I'll have stuff come up at 7 a.m. in California, and people on the East Coast are like, look, I'm moving, I'm grooving, I'm ready to go. So in any event, I wake up usually to like 30 emails because of this, but I'm joking with you a little. What was the question, actually? I'm happy to go first.
Lessons learned, tips and tricks, anything that you'd like to share with the founder community. I know that you had some really great insights about what maybe investors are looking for, but maybe a different approach that you take.
Is there anything burning? I'm happy to go. Okay, yeah. I'll give a couple of pieces of just general advice or things that I've learned along the way. I think first and foremost, and this is ironic because obviously I'm on a panel giving advice, but I do think you want to be mindful of how much advice you take, who you take it from. I think in the early days of my business, I had so much angst because it would be like, you get 10 different people's opinion. They're all different from each other. They're different from what your own intuition might be. And then you just end up in, the state of confusion and swirling. And so, now when I speak to people, I just try to remind them every business is its own organism. You know, like the world is different today than it was 5 years ago. The technology is different. The competitive landscape is different. Your skills are unique. And so I'll just be really mindful of like your business is an N of one, and that's the way it should be. It's like every path to success is different. So that'll be my first thing. And then I think my second thing is just, you know, being mindful of like just the mental roller coaster, you know, and I think this is true not just of being a founder, but probably true of any high impact role, which is that the highs are very high and you feel like, yo, we conquered the world, right? The lows are very low. You're like, man, this might be the end of the road, right? And so like, I think just that constant up and down can be a lot. And so trying to keep yourself on like more of an even keel can be really useful. So those would be my top two pieces, I think.
And I think when we were chatting in preparation for this, you talked a little bit about being thoughtful about the approach to growth. And you know, sometimes we can get caught up in this mindset that it's grow at all costs, and that's become the buzzword in the marketing circles. This year, it's moving away from growth at all costs and moving toward efficient growth. Any thoughts you'd like to share about sort of your approach or thought about, you know, how to look at your scheduling and how you're working today and how that might support your long-term growth?
Yeah, you know, someone gave me this advice once, and I don't know if this is exactly the piece you're referring to, but like basically the advice they gave me was like, if you couldn't keep the pace that you're at for 5 years, you're probably moving too fast, right? Like with the idea being like, you don't want to just burn yourself out, right? And like chase every dollar or chase every opportunity. And so, you know, that's how I think about it today. It is still a lot, but like just trying to be mindful of like, okay, this is a long journey. Could I keep the pace that I'm at kind of consistently and not be on this like constant all in, burnt out, all in, burnt out? Like, you know, you want to kind of build the business over time. And I think if you just kind of go brick by brick, eventually, you know, you'll get to where you're going.
Thank you. Natalie, how about you? Lessons learned.
Okay, lessons learned. I mean, I would say a lot of our, there's been a ton, but a lot of the lessons we've learned are in regards to like retail relationships or inventory planning, which they were talking about in the last panel. But retail relationships, I think we early on, I think my advice would be don't accept a PO too large because you always want to test that relationship if you can and make sure that you're not over investing. We had a particular situation, and this was like years ago, where it just wasn't a retail fit, and so we had too large of a PO that shipped to them, and then a lot of inventory as a result. So that would be my advice in regards to retail. But as far as inventory planning, it's always been a challenge for us. Like we've been at times, like especially during COVID, where you know we couldn't keep enough stock, and so we were under on inventory. But then there were times where we overbought and we had too much inventory and too much cash in inventory. So trying to get that balance right is definitely tricky. And so my advice there would be to secure a partner early on. Obviously, this is a Kickfurther plug, but truly, we just launched in all doors in Target, and they're the reason we were able to do that because they funded the inventory, which would have been a challenge otherwise. So what I wish I knew is 5 years ago, starting with like an inventory plan, because we always just spent all of our cash on inventory, and therefore we didn't have, you know, a ton of cash to actually run the business. So if I would go back, I would secure a partner like that early and make sure that my cash is actually working to acquire customers or build a team and actually benefit the growth of the business, because inventory, there are other people that will buy the inventory for you, and that would be my lessons learned the hard way.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we're so happy to be a partner to both of you, and definitely check out their products, both super excellent. If they're, find them nearby. So we have a little bit of time for questions, if anyone has a question for any of our panelists. Yes?
Sorry, question for Natalie. When you say buy the inventory for you, do you mean buy it like at wholesale pricing, or is it like a partnership in which like they buy straight from the manufacturer?
You mean Kickfurther? But they fund the inventory. So using someone else's cash essentially so that your cash is not tied up in inventory, so that your cash is, in your ad agency and your customer acquisition costs and everything else where you could grow the business.
And that was specifically for the Target partnership? partnership?
The Kickfurther was, yes.
Okay,
And we've
that
used
makes
them
sense now.
a few times at this point and we'll continue to, but it's just that's been a really good relationship for us that we only learned about really probably 6 to 8 months ago, I would say. And it would have been so helpful to know about this like year one because we always just spent all of our cash on inventory. And then that doesn't really leave you wiggle room, if you're not VC backed,
Right.
to spend on team and marketing and innovation, things like that.
Totally. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions?
Thank you both so much for sharing your stories. I was wondering if you could also share an unexpected challenge along the way. I'm sure pushing product and getting it noticed and having other people also recognize its value is such a challenge. And I was just wondering if you could touch on either that or anything else along the way that has been more of a surprise, but an uphill battle.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. You know, it's something that I've come to call like the credibility gap. Well, you know, when I started my career at General Mills, almost always whoever you called, you were like their most important phone call for the day, right? Because you were a multi-million-dollar account and it was important to them, right? And so I think you create, I'll speak for myself, I created probably an inflated sense of like my own importance or the strength of those relationships, right? Because I felt like, okay, when I go start my own company, I'll just call those same people and I will be in Costco in next week, right? You know what I mean? And the reality is like no one really cared about what I was doing besides me and probably like my mom or whoever, you know, in the early days, right? Like more likely than not, people are going to disbelieve in what you're doing until you've created some kind of traction. And so like one thing that I would be mindful of if I was starting again is just like, you know, that first year you just got to be willing to hear a lot of like disbelief, you know, negative feedback, whatever. And it's like you want to pull out the kernels of truth from that, but you also want to know like when to ignore some of that stuff and at least, you know, get to a place where you have good clarity.
I would second that. I feel like when we first launched, everyone was like wrist weights. Even our friends, they were like, that's a stupid idea. So let's see. I would say a challenge. I blanked now. What I learned along the way. Oh, counterfeits. That's what I was going to say. We now protect ourselves with every product we launch, and we know that. But what I didn't know is there isn't like a global U.S. or a global patent. And so I think we got a patent in the U.S. We did get a patent on just in the U.S. on the bangles, but unfortunately, like we didn't know to get global patents. And so what happened is just a lot of counterfeits. And so protecting yourself if you have a product that is like easily replicable is really, really important. And it sucks to deal with and you just kind of have to like move on and keep going. But I think protecting your IP as much as you can at the beginning is important.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions for our panelists? We have a few minutes. All right, great. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.